Hello and welcome. My name is Emily Prieto, and I'm the co-host of the Seeds of Tao podcast alongside my husband, Joshua Prieto. We are also the co-owners of the Seeds of Tao education platform and incubator for regenerative entrepreneurs. Now, if you're new to the podcast, this is a podcast for regenerative entrepreneurs creating regenerative enterprises. We often get asked what exactly a regenerative enterprise or entrepreneur is. So if you're wondering, a regenerative enterprise builds triple bottom line profits through the practice of ethics and principles that lead to a more inclusive, fair, and balanced economy. Regenerative entrepreneurs, or regenpreneurs as we like to call them, are those willing and able to take on the financial and personal risks of starting and building regenerative enterprises. You'll get to know exactly what all of that means as you join us for this and future episodes. But know that we welcome everyone to join us as we work to build regenerative economies together. That's exactly why we're here doing what we do at Seeds of Tao. Our mission is to help establish regenerative economies in every bioregion by serving individual regenpreneurs like yourself. In this podcast, you'll hear the startup stories in all their glory from regenpreneurs all over the globe. You'll learn and grow the skills of building a regenerative enterprise from your peers, mentors, and leaders. Finally, we'll get to know each other as you engage in the podcast and join the wonderful Pando Academy Commons community, an open community where peers, colleagues, funders, allies, and supporters of regenerative entrepreneurs come together to build the regenerative economies of the future. Join us every month for a wonderful episode as we collectively move beyond sustainability and into our regenerative future. It all starts now. Welcome everyone to the Seeds of Tao podcast. It's Emily Prieto here with my good friend Liz. Say hi, Liz.
Hi, so good to be here. Thank you, Emily.
Awesome. So we always like to start out with what got you up and excited today and excited to do the work that you're doing.
Well, Emily, what gets me up every day is the vision I have to transform our food systems here in the States and have local food more accessible to everyone within our communities. And today in particular, I work every day on this, and today is a usual weekday of that work, but here we are in February in the Mid-Atlantic, and we woke up to a gorgeous day today. Blue, sunny skies and warm weather. And that makes all of us here very happy.
Excellent. That sounds great. So do you have like a kind of morning routine that you go through every morning to get you up and kind of revved up for the workday?
I do. I have a morning routine I found that I really enjoy. It's based on the Miracle Morning book.
Yes,
Hal
love that
Elrod.
Totally. Love me some Hal.
Yes, I really enjoy that. It's very inspiring, and the routine itself fits neatly into my life at this point. Maybe at first it was a little awkward, but at this point it fits very neatly in. It has the elements that I value and that are really important to me. So I feel adjusted by it.
Nice. Yeah. I've been doing different Miracle Morning compilations for years now. And, you know, sometimes it's a little more of this or a little bit more of that, but that like getting going in the morning with like a surefire routine makes such a difference. Oh man. So
it does, especially, with us, with a house full of children, it's kind of essential to know what's next and not have to think about it all the time.
Totally. And before that household of kids comes at your face in the morning, like you've already gotten grounded, you can handle whatever comes.
It's so huge. True. Yes.
It's huge. Now, I know that you're a mompreneur. So I'd love to hear how you got started in the work that you're doing.
That's a great story. I love it because like so many of us, our children are what bring us into this world and give us the passion that we need to keep going. And sure enough, when my oldest was a baby, which she's now almost 21, so it was many years ago for me, she had some health challenges that concerned me that the doctors and the medical establishment, shall we say, could not provide answers for. And as the mama bear, I wanted to find solutions. I wanted to provide health for my children. That was a very important value to me from the beginning. So looking at the options I had, I explored thoroughly the benefits that nutrition could provide. And in that journey, I realized that I wanted to be sourcing clean, healthy foods as unprocessed as possible from local producers. Mm-hmm. That was a really tough order. And it required a huge amount of driving on my part, a huge amount of research and logistical work and legwork. And Emily, I know you'll understand this. Here I am with a baby and pregnant. And, I have 5 kids. So I spent many years of life pregnant and nursing. And all around me, I could find liquor stores. I could get alcohol and cigarettes any day, all day long. I could feed my children fast food 3 meals a day if I wanted. Mm-hmm. I could give them soda pop and lollipops all day long. That was all fine. But I felt like we need to have local, clean food as frequently as we have these other options. That's what drove me into what I do in establishing local food networks, in making these foods available to local communities, working with farms to transition to more organic and more regenerative practices. That's where it started.
Mm-hmm. And so kind of making that transition from concerned mama bear and wanting something more, we all, in all this purpose-driven work, we all start with wanting something more, wanting something better. So where was the transition where you would say you really went from concerned mama bear to now I'm an entrepreneur and I have this business is cause to grow?
That's a good question because it happens so gradually. It's not a clear demarcation, but obviously the process of becoming a business helps with that demarcation. And that was definitive for me. It went from, okay, this is a service that I'm just providing at my own expense to other people, to finally, actually, this is a service I'm providing and that is worthy of remuneration, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's a hard transition for a lot of people. I think a lot of times we see the value of what we're doing, but it's hard for us to ask. I mean, others can see it, but it's hard for us to ask to be reciprocated in that line. Like that point of, now I'm going to ask for money for this, other than if people are like, hey, you should charge for this. Because then it's kind of always easier. You feel like you get permission. So did you have any like mental obstacles there? Or was it something that was like, yeah, this is value and you should pay for it and I will give, and we have this give receipt? How was that transition? Was there anything going on there?
Both at the same time. Yeah, it's both at the same time and always both, and they're overlapping because I also so strongly feel that two things that contradict each other, I feel all the time, which is one, food is a fundamental, access to food is a fundamental right for every human being on this earth. And that I also strongly believe that this is something that we are given by the earth, food to feed and nourish our bodies. And it's only modern systems that have undermined that. At the same time, if we're going to add our own time, labor, and expertise to a certain process, then absolutely we deserve to be rewarded for that time, expertise, and labor, and rightfully so. So you see how these two things overlap and somewhat contradict, but really complement each other at the same time too.
Sure. Definitely. Yeah, there's, especially in permaculture and regeneration, we, talk about this exchange of energy and we want things available to all, things for no cost. And then, but there is some type of energy exchange that's above that there is a cost, and that can be a really hard thing. So I'm interested to hear, so when things started picking up for you and you got more engaged with your business, with your activism and stuff, how did you balance that in the home? Like, how was that in the home for you as the mom of the home?
Yeah, that's another tough question, because I don't think that there's always a balance. And I think that sometimes when we're in the grind of the day to day, we don't notice where the imbalance is. It's only in retrospect that we say, I could have done that differently. So as with little children, it's really tough. It's really tough to figure out how you're going to allocate each day, each hour, and you don't always get it right. And then the retrospect and the perspective of 10 years later, 5 years later, you can say, oh, that could have been done in a slightly different way, or maybe a 180-degree different way. But I think that that's something I hear all the time from other women in business. And I feel as well that it's a big challenge to be truly in balance. And then whether or not you are, even if you are, to actually know that you are. It's not an easy answer. It's just part of the day-to-day questioning.
Yeah. So were you like the mom, like showing up to these things like with a kid on each hip type of thing? Or did you have like family that could take care of your kids? Like what was it like with your kids at that time? How did you balance that?
Yeah, well, good question. And thanks for the clarification on that. There were times, many times, that I did all of the work wherever they happened to be in life at the moment. So I would go to meetings at Congress with a baby and go to events that I'd set up with babies and toddlers and whoever was there at the time of the children, because that's just the way it is. When you have little ones, they are part of your life and they're part of your space, and you integrate them.
Interesting. Huh. And so how because I mean, you're showing up to be this voice, right? For these people, but you are bringing these kids into these spaces where it's not necessarily like a family friendly space or a kid friendly space. How did it feel to show up kind of in that space? Do you feel like people saw you as more or less, like kind of the outside perspectives from showing up in this unique way to do what you're here to do? How do you think that was accepted or not? I'm interested to hear.
Well, varied reception all over the place. Sometimes I did a lot of work in legislative circles to change policy to shift food access. And when I brought my children, people loved it, and it made me memorable. So rather than just being another suit showing up in their office, here I am with 3 little kids and each of their little unique quirks. I broke up their day a little bit. So it made my issue a little more memorable. And in that regard, I would tell other mamas, do the same thing. It makes people's day to see a baby sometimes. And on the other side of it, you have the more stern, shall we say, characters who really like specific protocols or this pre-designed notion of professionalism. And they're a little bit less welcoming, but adaptive, I would say, adaptive to when a mama has a baby, you adapt to it. And I've been pleasantly surprised often, more often than not. I've been pleasantly surprised by the reception of having young children with me in these situations.
And so as the kids have gotten older, have they continued to kind of join you in your work? Or are they kind of doing their own thing? Where has their interest landed with that?
To some extent, they've all remained interested, but less involved. And as the children age, it's a lot different. It's different types of parenting. It's hard to explain, but it is freeing in many ways when I don't have to plan so precisely to go to a meeting or figure out where the kids are going to go if they're not going with me. It does add a layer of relief and a layer of flexibility on my end.
Definitely. So as you've had this activist / entrepreneurial journey, what do you think has been the hardest part for you?
That's a really hard question. I'm going to take a stab at it. The hardest part, wow, that gives me pause. There's a couple of things that come to mind in response to that. One of them, I think, is the steep learning curve when it comes to our food policy, what people are actually putting in their bodies and have access to versus regenerative and restorative practices that add nourishment to our bodies and to the earth, and the deep chasm between those two realities. Even when people know the information and they know that certain foods are better for their bodies, better for the earth, better for the community, they still make decisions not based on that level of information. One of the hardest things for me is seeing people I know and love continuing to make those decisions with all of the facts at their fingertips, and not just at their fingertips, in their minds. They know these things. And to some extent, yes, we are all making compromises every day. So I'm not even talking about the difference between 80% and 100%. I'm really talking about not even 10%. That's frustrating to me because a part of me also feels like, well, if my goal in life and my life mission is to increase local food access and to bring communities together around local food production and security, the people who know and trust me the most don't understand how important that is. How are other people going to? It's a tough hill to climb.
I hear you. I feel like a lot of people in regeneration can have that similar struggle. We're so attached to this, solar punk future and the things come to pass that we were really hoping in, and we tell to everyone the kind of change we want to see, what's broken right now and how we want to get it fixed. And yet we all, I think, have family and friends that are like, oh yeah, that's great. And then they just keep doing exactly what they've always been doing, right? It's this cultural dialogue. It doesn't change entirely. I think that we're starting to see movement and shifting and adjustments. I know that for a long time, regeneration and permaculture has been this like edge culture, right?
Yeah.
And people like us, the entrepreneurs that are kind of really riding that edge, are trying to get it to cross over into the mainstream, getting it into more homes, into more situations and things like that. So focusing instead of on the challenges, what things, are there any principles or any kind of broad stroke actions that you have seen to be helpful along these lines of getting people to have kind of a mental shift? Because I know there's many different ways we can go about it, and some really works and some really doesn't. So what have you seen that does work?
Making strong connections with people, building those relationships, because ultimately, too, we all want to be connected. And building on those connections as the foundation, there's different values that people are going to prioritize at different times. So the value of being part of a community versus the value of getting the healthiest food possible. Different people are different places, and even those two specific values at different times in their lives. And so making those connections and building the relationship, that gives me encouragement and hope and keeps me going, because then you realize, okay, you're making this decision based on another value that's driving you rather than a lack of values or something else that's missing, right? It's there. We're actually speaking the same language. We're actually connected on this. And we're choosing two different conclusions or two different actions to take based on that. Does that answer the question? It's kind of a
I think so. Well, focusing on the connection and the community. I totally agree with that. I think in the generative realm, especially, we have to be really careful, because we can tend toward preachy, right? We want people to stop doing what they're doing. We want to get up on our soapbox and be like, no, this is how you need to do it, people. You need to stop doing this. This is the answer. We all should see this. Why aren't you doing this, right? And it can almost turn into this like shame relationship. And then people are pushed away because we're just going in and telling everyone how they should do it. But instead, if we come to it from a connection point, a community building point, a lifting up as opposed to pushing down energy, I think that totally changes the game.
Absolutely. I completely agree, Emily. And that's part of what I love about yours and Josh's work, is that it's so incentive based. It's like, what are we seeing humans do? What behaviors are humans doing? And what is incentivizing those behaviors? And if we want to see a different result, for example, regenerative agriculture, regenerative businesses, how do we incentivize those small shifts so that people can do them in their already normally architected lives? Yeah, I think that's key, that you're so right. And I completely agree that coming from the connection, coming from that place of this person is making this choice based on this value, and showing them that, hey, this action also matches that value can be really powerful. And that's so much of the work you're engaged in.
Let's take a moment for a brief promotional break to tell you about a free community event Seeds of Tao hosts each month that focuses on helping impact entrepreneurs like yourself create regenerative enterprises. First off, I want to say that we believe in you. You put everything you've got into creating positive change in the world, and that's why you deserve a special day each month to be supported in that work. On the first Wednesday of the month at 1 p.m. Pacific or 4 p.m. Eastern, or whatever time it turns out to be in your area, we have our Regenpreneur think tank. If you're starting, building, or growing a regenerative enterprise and want to connect, support, and collaborate with others doing the same, come join us. We share the challenges that are coming up in our businesses, find solutions together, hold each other accountable, and build support for each other's work. Find out more about the monthly think tank by following the promotional link in the description below. Hope to see you there. Yeah, I think, in permaculture, we always talk about like the people care, future care, earth care, and the earth care is usually the one screaming at us, right? But we have to be careful that we don't take that on by compromising people care. That's not going to work. It's a tandem thing. Without the people care, we won't be able to do the earth care. Without the people care, what does future care matter? There's no people, right? It's an interesting thing.
Yes.
So I mean, a lot of times also in this work, I mean, the problems that we're looking at are huge. They're widespread. I mean, I know you're focusing on the States, and there's a lot of households in the States that have this issue. And, some people in regeneration focus on this huge environmental issue or this huge environmental issue. So what do you do to keep that problem that you're fighting against become so overwhelming and crippling? Because it we can just get stuck in the mud, focusing on the problem So we have to like really keep ourselves going. So how do you do that?
Oh, a bunch of different ways. When I went through my permaculture design course, one of the days, the focus was what gives you hope. And I return to that lesson frequently in my life. I constantly ask that question and remind myself of those answers. And I will also say I don't remember where this was or how this came up, but somebody very wise said to me that babies and people having babies are the surest sign of hope. Because if you're going to bring a child into this world, you've got to believe to some extent that things are going to be good enough for that child. And so I celebrate every time I hear the news, a friend or a loved one or a total stranger, a baby is a sign of hope. And there's also that the problems are very real. This is true, but so are the celebrations. And when we see those seedlings come up, when I see the first radish is ready, when I see the sunflowers in my garden, this is all of it is something to celebrate, and something to celebrate so wholly and completely that it can be overwhelming standing in that space and in that moment of these are sunflowers and they're here and it's summer, without diminishing any of the suffering or the sorrow or the grieving of the real problems. It really doesn't. And I think that's one of the strongest paradoxes of being human and being in this space and being in this moment right now, that we can hold that immense celebration and gratitude and at the same time be completely honest and sad about the problems in the world right now.
And without those problems, those celebrations may not be so sweet.
This is true too.
Because it's celebrating those in the face of all that, which is not easy to do. Not easy to do. Even, bringing it down to a lot smaller scale. Being a mom and being an entrepreneur is hard, but just being a mom by itself without all that side stuff is hard. And we have days where that's the 4 or 5 huge problems running around in the house all day, and it's a nightmare. Yeah. But we still have to choose kind of the same thing to focus on the good. How do we celebrate? How do we be present, regardless of what situation it is, whether we're a mom or not, whether we're fighting this huge behemoth with these little solutions or not. I feel like there's always going to be something, right? We can always find something to be sad about in the world. We can always find something to be scared of happening. But if we don't give away our power, we can keep our power when we choose to focus on the positive things.
Totally. And I'll also say that, I'm turning 43 this year, and by then I'll have a 21-year-old and 4 more younger ones. So I'm here in life, and I've definitely already had years of how am I going to get through the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And I've had years of, wow, things are amazing, right? So we have different times in our lives, and that's totally okay. And we can't wish them away. And the only way out is through. And that is both terrifying and brilliant and amazing at the same moment. But we can get through. And part of that is building that resilience, like you said, with the people around us, with the earth, with our families, building that resilience so that when we're in those moments of, I cannot get through another day like this alone, we don't have to. We've got resilience around us.
And building that internal resilience, even regardless of the people around it. Like, is like so key. In permaculture, we always talk about designing from zone zero, but our zone zero is not our family. It's not our community. It's not the neighbor down the street. It's just ourselves, you know, that's makes a huge difference. And it's so interesting because we can talk about all these principles, all these truths, and they really, that they're truths when they can apply to everything, when they can apply to personal life, when they can apply to business, when they can apply to global change. Josh and I always joke around about calling out the permaculture principles in the family, where we're like, no kids, slow and small solutions. And we're like, ha, 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 in the corner. But these things are, you can always find places to use these things. They're like little tools that you can use all over the place. Observation and interaction, all those things. And it's always good to remember those for no matter where you're at in life, whether you're at home or at the office or whatever, because you can always use them.
Exactly.
So thinking about where you're at now in your entrepreneurial journey and where you started, if you could look back and give Liz a piece of advice back when she started being an entrepreneur, what would you tell her?
It would be to keep going. And it would be to monetize the stuff that I didn't think was worth monetizing. It would also be that nobody else has my best interest in mind. And so I'd better have my best interest in mind.
Definitely.
And to be a little more stern about that.
It's good to remember. Especially when we're looking for someone to throw a bone, or if we're in a really tough spot. And if something seems like an easy way, or someone has a way to do something, oh, well, this could just be a little easier, or get me this farther ahead. But sometimes we take those before we really think and really check in with ourselves. Is this really the best thing right now? Or do I just need to keep pushing through the hard stuff? And sometimes, like you said, you just have to keep going. You just have to keep pushing. And we always joke about the term, the entrepreneur grind, because sometimes it just feels like a grind, a slow, painful, full of tension and resistance, right? It's a different type of person who chooses to be an entrepreneur.
And that being said, I mean, that's the advice I would give to me. Now, I think that different people need to look at their own specific, unique circumstances and decide if it's right to keep going with that particular business model they've developed, or that particular situation, and make discerned decisions. And I guess to clarify that a little bit, it would be to keep going in the sense of keep putting my voice out there, making sure that I claim my words so that other people don't get to claim them, and my ideas and what I've actually created, and to keep going with that and not let this is so classic, not let other people's opinions come in the way of that, of what I know is my gift and what I know is my contribution.
Yeah, because I mean, sometimes we do just have to give ourselves permission to not keep going in this certain direction, but that doesn't mean we're giving up on what we're pushing forward.
Exactly.
Right? Don't give up on the cause. Don't give up on your why, on your passion. But sometimes we have to pivot. It's not turning everything off. It's not selling the whole car. We're just pivoting. We're just taking a different road.
Yes, I love that analogy. And what a great question. These are really deep questions. I love them.
So I know that a lot of people, like when we talk about entrepreneurs, that's, the word we use more than anything in our household, entrepreneur. And we always joke about how terrible it is to say, how terrible it is to spell.
Totally.
Entrepreneur. But like I was saying before, like entrepreneurs really are these like different breed of people because not everyone can be an entrepreneur. What would you say in your journey of becoming an entrepreneur? What have you kind of fostered? In what ways have you grown? You know, like what traits have you developed? How has becoming an entrepreneur turned you into a different person and how?
That's innumerable. It has caused a lot of growth for me. And I thought I was going to be an English teacher, which is very different. And then I thought I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom. And then I realized, no, nope. So it has fostered my growth in so many different directions. I can hardly count them, but to name a few, it's caused and invited me towards systemization, organization that did not come naturally to me. Okay. I had to work really hard at the organizational tools that I've put into my life that make everything work better. It did not come naturally to me. A lot of people now know me as this super organized person, but I'm like, I had to fight myself and my habits for however long, 25, 30 years, in order to get to that point of organization and systemization. So that comes to mind immediately as to how that entrepreneurial journey has caused growth or invited me to grow. Another area is boundaries. And I would say I was on that journey anyway because of other things in my life, but definitely the boundaries come into play because if you're going to be in this entrepreneurial world, when is work time? When is family time? Who gets a piece of me whenever they want versus who gets a piece of me whenever I say it's okay? And being centered in those boundaries. It took growth for that to occur.
Interesting. So you were, I'm curious, you were talking about this organizational, systematic new Liz, right? So what would be like the top, I don't know, 2 or 3 things that like now you cannot live without because those keep you so organized? Like what are your magic lamps here to keep you organized and systematized?
Systems or tools?
Tools or systems. Something.
Okay. They overlap, don't they?
Yeah.
Meal planning. The morning routine that we talked about earlier, that is great. I've had variations of that for many years, but this one is my favorite. And the, can I make up a word?
Yes, always.
The calendarization of our lives.
Oh, totally.
So for my particular tool that I use is Google Calendars. And that is both a tool and a system because every person in the family has their own calendar and it all goes in there and it all is accessible. And we go by that. Making sure in a large family, making sure that you know who needs what, when, where is essential, or else you just go nuts with all the moving parts. And it's also that I can transfer that from the calendar to whatever other place that information needs to be, whether it's like a text message, like go pick up your brother at blah, 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 or whatever that looks like. It's just all part of that system. But that level of scheduling, the meal planning has become huge.
Yeah.
And
I hear you.
Yeah. And the routine aspects of things. So I really like to know that this happens on this day every week. This happens on this day every week. That structure.
I totally resonate with that. Josh and I both we share the same Google Calendar. So we can all see who's busy when, because we got 4 kids that we are at home. They aren't off to school, and that someone has to be there for them, and they're not big. They're not taking care of themselves yet. Our little guy is still 5. He's going to be 6. But we also have so they're not using a Google Calendar, but we have a big whiteboard in the kitchen with the days of the week. And every Sunday I go through and I fill it in because my kids, and some of them deal with some anxiety stuff. And so they really want to know, oh, I have this class this day, or I have this that day. No, that's not today. That's tomorrow. And so everyone can show up feeling prepared.
Yes.
For the whole thing. And we have our little morning meeting every morning to talk about what's going on for the day. And almost exactly the same way, Josh and I have a meeting every single morning for 5 minutes. We call it our stand-up meeting. And we're like, hey, this is what I got done yesterday. This is what I'm doing today. This is what I need help with, right? Just like that check-in. And we can all see the calendars. And that, like, if I can get it out of my head onto a list, onto a board, onto a calendar, I don't have to carry that.
Yes.
I feel that's also, like you were saying about meal planning. Oh my gosh, it seems like such a small thing to just meal plan, but getting it out of your head and making one less decision, well, 3 for 3 meals, 3 less decisions you have to do in your personal life, like opens that up to be able to make those in your business. Because, oh my goodness, let's just take a moment of silence for decision fatigue, because it is a real thing and people are afflicted. I am a constant victim of decision fatigue. And not just as a mom, but also as an entrepreneur. Like, we have to make so many decisions all the time. And eventually we'll get to the point we just can't. We're like, I don't know, just do something. And we're not able to show up in as our true selves, pushing forward what was really, really going on, or pushing forward our purpose and our intention, because we're just so worn down by all the million decisions that we don't really need to make every single day, because we can systematize it. We can make it more efficient. And even more than just men entrepreneurs, I'm going to say mom entrepreneurs need it 100 times more, because we are balancing so many more tasks. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I love so much of what you just said, Emily, and the shout out to moms in particular, and that whole thing about decision fatigue, could not agree more. And then one comment I want to make on the earlier thing you were saying, like how much it is truly our responsibility as leaders within our family to manage expectations. I cannot even tell you how many times I have not put something on the calendar and I've had a kid, even an older kid, melt down in tears because they didn't know what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well, that part of it is simply just managing expectations, but it is our responsibility. And then all the little things we've got to navigate within that mental load.
Mm-hmm.
It is exhausting. It's exhausting, on its own.
Yeah.
And the more, and here we go. I mean, not to put more responsibility on us because we already have it, but to clarify and verbalize the responsibility that exists is that when we show up in our intention, in our leadership self, everything around us works better.
True. Yeah. Well, and that's that whole zone 0 thing.
Yeah.
Right? If our zone 0 is taken care of, we can handle zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, husband, kids, business, blah, 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 blah. But if zone 0, oh my gosh, we have this joke, everyone talks about like, oh, we'll fill your cup first, right? Always fill your cup. And then I have these days where my cup is empty and it is crumpled up and I'm throwing it at people. Like, that's how I feel. And I'll tell Josh at the end of the day, and I'll be like, I'm sorry for today. I was throwing my cup at you like 100 times today, and it's my fault because I didn't fill my cup. Right?
That's a wonderful analogy.
I have to be so careful because if I don't set boundaries, if I don't take the space for me to recharge, not as entrepreneur, not as mom, just as Emily, if I don't do that, I can't show up in a positive way at all. I can't serve those people because I haven't served myself. And then I get really like bitter and like so deeply mad because then I feel like they've like taken that from me, which is that wasn't even their intention. That's not even what they were doing. It's just if you really let yourself get empty, like no good's going to come out of that. And it's going to like breed all these bad feelings. It's really weird. Like
zone 0 people take care of number one first.
And acknowledge and recognize how hard of a journey parenting is, full stop.
Yeah.
Across the board, under all circumstances, parenting is the hardest thing we'll ever do.
Yeah. Preach. Yeah. So I feel like a lot of these things that we've been bringing up about, we've talked about community, we've talked about like organization and systemization and not giving up when things get rough, but also like accepting feedback and being okay to pivot. I feel like all these things we've talked about kind of in a business perspective and also in a personal perspective, but it really comes full circle as kind of that regenerative life design, whether in business, whether at home, the principles are the same, and applying these truths that we all know in the regenerative realm, because we talk about them all the time, but making sure that we're true to those helps us to really live a more regenerative life, like internally, so that we can, then go on with our amazing dreams of bringing local food to people and helping with this and helping with that and tackling those things. But if we start with our regenerative life, right, and our regenerative zone 0, that's like the core. That's like where to start, right?
Yes. And one of the ways I've addressed that with myself internally over the years is I have this really strong belief that people deserve good, clean, healthy food. They deserve to be loved. They deserve to be on this earth and enjoy life, right? There's so much that we just deserve because we're here. And seeing the way I would minimize myself in that and give because everybody else deserves all this. Then finally talking to myself and saying, well, I am among them. And I can't keep doing if I don't look at zone 0, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Very important to keep that in perspective.
Definitely. It's really overlooked, but it's so critical to any other success anywhere.
Yeah, it really is.
It's so interesting. I've been reading these books about women entrepreneurs. There's this one book. Now I'm reading 2 at a time, and now I can't remember which one was it that I'm referring to. But she was talking about how men are often in these big leadership positions. So we see women do it too, but specifically these big CEOs that generally reach burnout. These big successful companies, you think they have it all taken care of, and they just have to quit or take it off because people are pushing themselves. As a culture, especially in the US that I found, we push ourselves to such an extent that we just crumble. Like we just can't. We have to totally back off of everything in or outside of the regenerative realm. And being in the regenerative realm, we know better. We know that we're supposed to take care of these systems. We know we're supposed to take care of the soil first, ourselves first, right? But it's not always easy to implement. So I think it's a great conversation. Especially in the realm of regenerative mompreneurs, because that's just an extra level, an extra layer on the cake that we have to make sure, because we have so much potential for impact. And so we have to take care of ourselves so we can show up and have that amazing positive impact that we're able to have.
Yes, I agree. And I also think it's important to note that we have a tendency, at least I've seen in my world of other women and moms and entrepreneurs who I speak with, women have a tendency to minimize their impact rather than acknowledge and understand it. And the conversation of it's such a small, this choice is such a small choice, it won't make a difference, minimizes the huge impact that we really truly have and denigrates us a little bit, or at least the results of our impact. So we really do matter, every single one of us, and every single one of those little choices, because those little choices culminate into much larger movements. They really do.
And we as women are so needed in those movements.
Absolutely.
So needed.
Absolutely.
People are just starting to see. So needed. I mean, that, I don't want to go into a huge whole women's rights. That's like a whole other episode and everything. But we'll just leave it at the regenerative work needs powerful women to show up and be leaders and move it forward and take care of themselves so that they can show up and teach others to show up for themselves. Because we have to teach our kids how to show up for themselves too.
Absolutely.
We can't be mommy martyrs, or we're teaching them to be mommy martyrs, mommy and daddy martyrs.
And showing up, having an impact sometimes looks like really small steps. It doesn't mean you have to get out there and on week 1 be doing all the things. No,
right.
You start with a very small step, and that small step has a cumulative impact.
Exactly. So I guess as a closing shout out to all the mom entrepreneurs out there, take care of your zone 0 ladies, and everyone else also. Everyone should be taking care of their zone 0 and keep going forward, but go with grace.
Yeah.
Like, give yourself grace, but don't give up. But just keep going.
And remember that we're here for each other.
Absolutely. This is a community thing. This is a movement. This is not a solo person going off and trying to change the world. Like, we are a global community of people looking to find regenerative change. There are communities out there. There's lots of people who know we have to do it together.
Exactly.
Awesome. So where can we get a hold of you to follow all the amazing things that you're doing, Liz?
Well, Emily, people can find me on my podcast, Nourishing Liberty, where we talk about our food systems and how we fit into them. And you can find my writing on Substack. It's Raw Milk Momma on Substack. And you can find me on my website, which is nourishingliberty.com.
Excellent. And we will put the links to those things in the show notes. So check out the show notes so you can follow Liz's amazing journey. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today, Liz.
Thank you, Emily. And I'm so excited to have you on my podcast.
Oh, me too. Continue the conversation.
Indeed.
All right. Thanks all, everyone. Have a great day and take care of those zone 0s.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. It really is a blessing and a pleasure to bring each episode to you. So what'd you think? If you'd enjoy this podcast, please leave us a review or follow us on the podcast platform of your choice. Each review really does help us further the reach of this podcast and move our mission forward to build regenerative economies in every bioregion. If you have a suggestion or feedback for us, please let us know in the open and free Pando Academy Commons community, which is linked in the description and in the show notes of this episode. In the Commons, we have an awesome community request form that allows you to suggest guests, register to be a guest on the podcast, and share your own Regenpreneur startup story or any other suggestions you might have for the community. Without your feedback and requests, this podcasting community wouldn't be what it is, so please let us know. Now, this may be bye for now, but remember, it doesn't end here. It has only just begun. The regenerative economies of the future start now with you.